All right. Well, it looks like we're at the top of the hour. We like to start these events on time. So let me go ahead and kick this off. Welcome to everyone around the world to our initial Cady Talks session with a focus today on fiber extension. My name is Jeff Burke. I run marketing here at DZS, and I wanted to I'm actually very proud to kick off a new session that we're going to be inaugurating today, which is our Cady Talk session, which is really a new format that we have. We're going to be doing this every month or two, in which we're going to have a focus on deep dives into very specific technology sections of our overall portfolio. And they're going to feature our field CTO, Mike Cady, who many of you have probably met over the course of the 20 plus years. He's actually been working with DZS. In addition to that, we're also going to be having conversations in which we'll have some guest speakers as well that come aboard and participate in these sessions as well. And today we're going to have Arian Purse, who's actually one of our sales directors, who has had a lot of experience in the fiber extension domain over the course of his career as well. So with that, let me just talk a little bit about format-wise. This conversation will probably initially go about 20 to 25 minutes. We will have we have a panel available, a question and answer panel available, that's a module that you can ask any of your questions on, that's available on the interface. So if anything comes up while we're having this conversation, please throw it in there and I will integrate it into the overall conversation itself, right? But with that said, why don't we go ahead and get started, Mike,
Sure.
and talk a little bit about fiber extension, because, as we all know, it's no matter where you are in the world, probably 30 to 60% of the subscribers in your network are probably served within MDUs, but that isn't the only use case for fiber extension overall. It really is a fantastic mechanism for actually just complementing fiber to the home build outs and leveraging this technology to address some of the hardest parts in the network itself. So with that, why don't we start chatting about how you see it playing out in the network, right?
No, yeah, I appreciate that, Jeff, and I'm excited to be here and welcome everybody. Of course, Jeff introduced me, Michael Cady. Been with DZS a long time, wearing multiple different hats, but always been heavily engaged with the customers. And it's exciting to be here, and I'm happy we have Arian here with us today. I really want to just have a conversation. I want to talk about the applications. I want to talk about the exciting product and how it fits into the network. I actually have one of the single port models in my hand right here. Hopefully you can see it. You can see how small it is. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But it's an interesting application, really, and multiple different applications, like Jeff had mentioned. One of the big pushes lately has been, how fast can you get fiber into the ground? How many houses can you pass? And everybody was, concerned with overbuilders and fiber, even incumbents trying to get fiber out into their network. It's really been about homes passed, how fast you can build a network. But now, we got to take a step back and really think about homes connected and subscribers connected, and passing by MDUs or passing by troubled or challenging installation in homes. It was easy to do and connect the masses with fiber, but now we need to take a step back and really figure out how to connect the rest of the homes and MDUs. So with
I
our yeah, Aaron, go ahead. Jump in.
yeah, I kind of think of these older brownfield MDUs as the new digital divide, right?
Yeah.
Because so many carriers have gone by and built fiber into all these neighborhoods, and they kind of just try not to look to the side when they go past those old MDUs, especially the small ones. And this is true of all different types of carriers, both the traditional telcos and the MSOs. Those buildings are just difficult to deal with. You can go wrap fiber all around the building, but that does take time, and sometimes you really anger the building owner because you really kind of can. Some of them take pride in their properties, and not every technician at any company takes pride in all their work. So I've seen some real messes out there, and I think traditionally the cable companies have gotten a bad rap for that type of thing, running running, coax through gutters and all sorts of things.
Right.
But yeah, these now with this product line, we have a really easy way to get into these old apartment buildings, and that's really where this all starts. There are lots of other use cases too, but getting into these old apartment buildings on the old wiring, just about any old wiring, even bridal wire, that was the wiring deployed in the United States in the early, like in the 1920s. We see gigabit services over that type of wire, maybe not at the full 500 feet that we advertise, but it's amazing how well this technology works.
Yeah, and one of the things that's so unique. I mean, obviously we have a full product line, and at the end we'll flash up the full suite, including our former Key Mile product that's widely deployed in Europe. But it really comes back to all the simplicity that you can have with it, with the remote powering, and that's something I really wanted to talk about today, as well, was the fact that when you install these units, you don't have to have a power meter, you don't have to have an outdoor power adapter. And for those that recall the days of outdoor O&Ts, and there was always that challenge of how do you get power? You have to have a meter collar, or maybe mount an outlet on the outside, ground fault, everything, or bring power through the wall and have that extra wiring, or even trying to use the spare twisted pair. It was always a challenge, and it was something that was really difficult. But with the DPUs that we offer, it really is unique that we have the remote power option. And I want to focus on that a little bit, because there's always questions about, when you have a multi-port unit, maybe an 8 or a 16-port unit, how does the powering work? And it's pretty unique how we can have just one endpoint connected and still have power running the DPU.
Right.
Hey, Mike, it probably makes some sense for us to orient people, at least to the background, our expertise in this, because obviously the three of us have been involved with probably thousands of fiber to the home build outs over time,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But and the DZS platform, historically your portfolio has had a fiber extension solution, right? But it recently was complemented by the acquisition of Netcom, which has vastly expanded not only the breadth of our expertise in this, but also the portfolio itself. Why don't I jump down to that slide? Maybe you can give everybody a bit of a sense of what that is.
We could do that
and
real
we'll pop
fast.
back
Yeah,
in.
absolutely, Jeff. So yeah, as Jeff mentioned, we have multiple different flavors of product. The ones you see on the bottom right, that has been in our family for many years, and obviously we've been enhancing the product. But the Milegate family, the 4, the 8, the 16, and then we have the 1RU rack mountable 24 port versions. Those are designed. You can see it has a housing, but they're not outdoor rated. So you would mount these inside of a laundry room or a basement, or some telco closet or somewhere indoors. But the advantage of these is you have the ability also to they have VDSL fallback, and they have an SFP cage on them. So you can use them for 1 gig or 10 gig Active E, just a straight optical connection, or you have the ability to do GPON or XGS-PON, and up to 16 port in that family there. But now with the new products that we've brought into our portfolio with the Netcom acquisition, as Jeff mentioned, we have a 1, 4, 8, 16 port GPON version, and then we also have the 1, 4, and 8 port XGS-PON version. The ones I'm focusing on upper left, those are all outdoor rated, IP68. So we're even talking about submersible. You can put these, in a handhole, or in a dog cage, whatever you want to call them, right? They can also be pole mounted. They can be wall mounted. So it's very flexible. All of those units are reverse powered. We also have the modular series, which is not IP68 rated, but it is still in a hard enclosure that does up to 16 port of the GFast as well. And that version has an SFP cage for GPON or XGS-PON. But earlier, I kind of held up the 1 port unit. This is exactly what it looks like. You can see it's not very large. And it's only got a couple small LEDs on the unit itself. But this 1 port unit, you have all the sealed wiring and the connections on the unit itself. So you got your fiber input, and then you've got your line output that goes over to the, to the twisted pair or whatever wiring you're using, and getting its power, reverse powered from the NTDs that you see up in the upper right. And those termination devices, there's two flavors. You've got the version on the left that is without pots, and then you have the one on the right, the NTD plus V, that has an integrated pots port if you still have the need for a SIP voice connection. So that kind of summarizes the portfolio. The units, the Milegate units, are not reverse powered. And like I mentioned, they're not IP68 rated, but they're also, very robust units that can support, the VDSL fallback and the SFP cages and such. So,
Yep.
anything you want to add to that, Arian?
Yeah, I mean, an interesting story about where these things came from. So on the Netcom version that you're looking at on the upper left-hand side, during the time in the United States when we built the predecessor to the CAF, or predecessor to the BEAD network, they did CAF 2.
Yeah.
And in Australia at the same time, Australia is where the Netcom company was based. They were doing a similar program that was a government program where they built a single network instead of competitive networks. And then they let the ISPs compete for customers on that network. But that was a fiber to the curb network. So they used mostly the 4-port version of this DPU, and they would put those in pedestals, and that's why these had to be all sealed and waterproof and and temperature hardened. And then they would mail the NTD to the customer along with a home gateway router when they signed them up. So different ISPs would win different customers. And so when you think about this product, we normally think of it as putting it on or in a building. But if you are an incumbent and have access to the copper in the ground, you can actually reuse that as well.
Exactly.
As long as your distance is less than 500 feet, you should be able to get a symmetrical gig that would be, indistinguishable from putting an ONT right next to the home gateway router and connecting it with an Ethernet cable.
So Jeff, jump back to slide 3. I think that was
Sure.
the one about with
that gives us the
model.
some, like this one, you think?
Even
Or
farther back, this one right here. So,
okay, yeah.
Again, talking about the different mounting options and where these things can be located. And there are units that have been in manholes or in pits for years, even submerged at times for long periods of time. So the IP68 rating is very beneficial. But it's interesting because, I've been doing this a long time. I've been involved with a lot of fiber builds, VDSL days in the past, even ADSL and everything. So I start, when I first learned a lot about the Netcom products, I kind of scratched my head of why would we have a 1-port unit? And it took a little bit to understand that. And I really want to talk about the one port unit, the one I held up a minute ago. There's so many unique applications.
It's kind of funny. It's surprising that that's our #1 seller. When you think of this mostly as an MDU play, and then our customers that are using it end up using the 1-port more than anything else.
Yeah. So Jeff, you have that one slide that talks a little bit about the TDS application. We had a webinar a few months ago when we had a guest speaker from TDS talking about their experience with fiber extension and all the advantages from what they've seen with using even the 1-port version as well. And you have Arian, I want you to talk about this. Kind of go through the advantages and it's not just difficulty, but it's also
I'll
we do have folks from all around the world, so let's tell
right.
people who TDS is in the first place.
Right.
Okay.
So I can kind of blend a few large accounts together in terms of what they're doing. TDS is one of the fairly large tier 2 players in the United States, and they have very aggressive build schedules, very aggressive schedules for getting new customers turned up. They're very successful with acquiring new customers. And then the question is, how do you get the new customers turned up on schedule and quickly? And so the 1-port DPU is playing a major role in their deployment because they can much more precisely schedule their technicians and get more turnups per day by using what we call kind of a light touch fiber installation rather than going and drilling and wrapping all around the whole house. So they can reduce their time, from what normally might be a 2 to 3 hour fiber turnup down to, say a 45-minute turnup. And
Yeah.
that's the big one there.
Yeah, and for that model, but you also got to think about opportunities where maybe you show up to an installation and the customer ghosts you. They're not there. They missed their schedule window, so now you've just wasted a truck roll. You wasted your install time. Or you arrive at the house or the location and they won't let you drill through the wall, or they won't let you do certain things. So this gives you that flexibility. The technicians can have these on their truck as a plan B, even if it wasn't part of their original desire, or and be able to still make the installation. And you mentioned earlier the ability to do the self-install. So I've held up the unit. You've seen pictures of the unit. You've got that unit mounted outside. You've got the fiber connected. You've got you hook up the twisted pair into the home or the apartment. And if the tenant's not there, or if it's a MDU scenario where maybe you turn up 1 or 2 tenants and then you have others that sign up later, they could do the internal installation themselves.
Yes.
A little bit about
maybe
what's involved there.
And maybe, Jeff, you should flip back to that slide where it shows all the different positions where you could locate one of these. Once you do the reverse powering, it really frees you up in terms of how you can do these installations. So you can mount the unit, and this of course depends on whether you're a competitive carrier or an independent. Are you an overbuilder or are you the incumbent at a location? But particularly the incumbents now can just look for wherever their new fiber could intersect their old copper, and that's where you would place the unit. You're not worried anymore about how to get power to that unit. So even in the multi-port units, even in our 16-port unit, the first customer, regardless of what port they're on, can provide enough power to get their own service up and running. And then as additional customers come on, they essentially load share that power. And so anybody can leave home and unplug their device anytime, and it doesn't affect their neighbors. So it's very fair. And even at 500 feet, that first customer on that 16 port on a single pair can get that 16 port up and running. So that's a huge benefit in terms of installation. And to your point, Michael, about a customer self-install, we do have several customers. I wouldn't say it's the norm, but we do have several customers that have prepackaged kits with the NTD and a home gateway router that they will leave on the front steps and tell a customer to plug in on their own if the customer isn't home during the scheduled install window. So, I mean, we've seen with some large carriers that if they miss that install on that first shot, they could lose 70 to 80% of those customers going to competitors. And
Exactly.
so it's so critical that they stay on track. And the honest truth is that we have some technicians that will take advantage of a product like this because it's easier to do a fiber install. But you do have to weigh that against the cost of getting off track and missing schedules. So I think that there's actually a business case here for a company that would want to do every single fiber installation with this product and not just the difficult ones. I mean, it's really obvious when you get to a house and they have the landlord, the tenant comes out and says, my landlord won't let me get a new hole drilled in the house for fiber. Well, then it's a real easy case, or if it's a customer who just had new siding and they just decide they don't want another hole, or if it's somebody that has a finished basement, they don't want you fishing fiber all through the basement. Or even like a condo where you would have to trespass and staple fiber across adjacent units, or a strip mall where you'd have to interfere with adjacent businesses. Like, these are all use cases where what we call disqualification avoidance. If a technician has one of these in the truck, they could go install it. But really, I think you could make a strong case for some competitive carrier to come in and say, you know what, we're doing 100% of our installs with this, this product, and we're just going to cut down the install time and do
And still offer gig service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at what those use cases are. I know you've been alluding to them, Marian, but you pulled this together. I think it makes a lot of sense to think about this, whether you're an incumbent or an alternative provider in a particular market.
Yep, that's a good
there's
point.
lots of options.
So we've talked about brownfield MDU, and that's the most obvious one, and probably the largest business case where when you're doing a new fiber build, there are all those apartment buildings that nobody knows what to do with. Keep a list of them, and maybe some of them you can get into easily with fiber, and that's fine. But we can help you get into the other ones. So the right way to do it is you make a list of those buildings. You could probably send somebody over to survey to make sure that you could get a fiber drop to the building, make sure that you have access to the building entrance terminal where the copper pairs are. And then you can load that building into inventory before you even buy anything from us. And that's huge from a capital efficiency perspective, right? You can load that building into your inventory. Once it's in inventory, your customers can qualify for gig service. And then only when a customer orders service do you send a tech out there, get a drop to the building, do the install of the DPU and the NTD in the apartment. And then subsequent customers in that building, it's just an NTD install. And those are quick installs. So that's a great application. Garden style apartment complexes are another good one where as a competitive carrier or as an incumbent, you may come into an area and see a large apartment complex with a bunch of small buildings in it. This is the perfect solution for that, where you can get in there at a lower cost than your competitors and also get the service into there quicker. Strip malls we mentioned, and condos, and then disqualification avoidance is where the tech can carry one of these around and use it strategically. Fast turn up is kind of that TDS model, and other customers that like to be able to just get a customer turned up right on schedule. And then just this construction speed to market is another one. Construction teams are under a lot of pressure to get huge swaths of neighborhoods turned up quickly. And we can bring you a lot of living units that are gig enabled very quickly with this technology. And from an incumbent only perspective, another really interesting use case, Mike, we should talk about is the rural drop reuse, right? Where you're going down a country road and you're looking at the cost of each drop to each of those farmhouses on the side of the road being kind of oppressive to the whole business case. And with this, we talk mostly about 1 gig at 500 feet, but with the one port version that Mike was holding up there, that will actually push 100 meg symmetrical, which is definitely bead capable when you're looking at the American bead program.
Yep.
So that would qualify. 100 gig is actually symmetrical, and you could do that at 2,000 feet of copper. So
yeah, let's take a look at that real quick. I think we have here on the bottom of this slide a good example of some of these use cases we've been talking about. And that one in particular, you can see what the speed service is and the typical reach for those environments.
Yeah, so you're reusing the copper from the pole all the way into the home and be able to take your fiber down the rural road or wherever you might be. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be rural. It can have areas where you just have difficulty getting fiber into the house, into the yard, and through the road or whatever you have to deal with, with right of ways and everything. So this gives you the ability to utilize the copper that may have already been there for 100 years,
that brings up another very strong business case, which if anybody out there has a technology that we were selling in I'm not saying DZS, but some of us are guilty, selling in the late 90s, fiber to the curb, where some various vendors had made these fiber systems, but fiber drops were still too expensive. And so the idea was you'd put a node serving a cul-de-sac like you got there on the lower left, or we're actually several of these slides. So you have a node feeding the a cul-de-sac, and then you have copper, feeding that last 500 feet. And a lot of those systems are still running 1.5, and they have really expensive and multiple power pairs with plus and minus 190 volts running down the street from cabinets and Soniluxes and all that stuff. You can shut all that down and get the power from the customer and upgrade them to a gig really easily.
Absolutely.
And that's an amazing
Makes sense for us to talk about that reverse powering for a second.
Yeah, we've talked about it a little bit already, and one of the things, that I want to stress here too, and it's been flashed up on a few of the slides, even though this is a DZS product, at DZS, we are very open and we work with multiple vendors on multiple different fronts. And this is a perfect example where this, NTD family can connect to multiple different vendors' OLTs. So it's not just a DZS only product. So if you've got another vendor's OLT in there, more than likely it's already been interoperated and already deployed.
Yep.
So it'd be pretty easy to just add this to the portfolio or add this to your business model for whatever OLT vendor you happen to be using. So, but back to the reverse power, and the other thing too, Arian, I wanted to touch on is, we've touched on the self-install piece, but it's the self-install for in the home or in the apartment is so easy. You're literally plugging in power. You're plugging in the RJ11 to the wall mount or wherever you have your phone your old phone line connection, and you hook up your Ethernet cable to your gateway. You're done. There's no fiber connection. There's always that concern about non-qualified people touching fiber or getting it dirty, or all those factors that go into a fiber self-install concern. But when you have this, it's as easy as it gets for the homeowner or the tenant to be able to turn up their service. So anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, this product really, a lot of times you might use a technician installing these might choose to use the unused pair. Usually there's a couple pairs going into the apartment. So they might clip off the pairs going to the other phone outlets in the apartment. So that would be sort of the ideal installation. But the system really is pretty flexible. And if you leave a kit there for a customer to install, and there's a bridge tap in the apartment, effectively, it usually isn't going to cause any trouble. It really is not very sensitive to the wiring. You can use the old red, green, yellow, black that's everywhere. As I mentioned before, I've even seen it running on bridle wire. So we don't even need the pairs to be twisted in order for this to work.
Yeah.
There's an interesting question that popped up on the Q&A, which was just acknowledging that isn't it unfair to have one customer paying for up to 16 other folks, right? On if in that thing you originally mentioned, Arian. But I think it actually gets to the fundamental question: how much is the power requirement in this particular device? Because my understanding is kind of negligible in terms of the impact that it hits the customer.
That's right, Jeff. This product is not going to push any more than 15 watts up the line toward that DPU. So even on that 16 port, you're not that one customer is not going to be providing more than 15 watts. And that really is only enough power to get their own port working. I mean, obviously you have to turn up the fiber interface and a few other things, but as soon as that second customer comes online, that second customer is sharing the power, and it actually drops down below 15 watts. So if you have a fully loaded 16 port device, I'm guessing each customer is probably not pushing more than 8 or 9 watts up the line, which is very comparable to a standard ONT.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jeff. So we're being cognizant of our time here. We've had a good conversation, but we're pushing on 30 minutes. Any Q&A we want to address real fast besides the one you just threw at us?
I do have one thing I want to mention before we forget, and that is that this product is natively twisted pair, and that's what we've been focusing on. There are some carriers that are more comfortable with coax, and we do have coax bail-in adapters that come with these, or that can be ordered with these devices. And your performance would actually be slightly better if you use that approach. So that's certainly available to you.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that popped up. Is do you have an Ethernet over coax unit, right? And so,
Yep. So the way we do that is with the balins, and those they're, you can't use just any old balin. These have to support the reverse powering. So that, balins have been around for years, but these particular ones that we use support reverse powering. And we have sort of a balin bulkhead that you can put next to the DPU, either in the basement of the building or outside somewhere. And then we have the single unit that goes inside the apartment. It's like a dongle that goes, next to your wall jack.
there was a question that popped up, I think is related to this question, honestly, which is, tell us about how this technology compares to G.hn versus Mocha, right? And
Sure.
we just happen to have a slide on this. Maybe we can walk through this, just quick comparison really quickly.
I don't know, Mike, if you want to start with that, or you want me to.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think, my perspective is that this is a really untapped market, and I think there's space for all different approaches here. So I'm not going to sit here and say that G.fast is the only way to serve all your apartments or businesses. We've chosen G.fast because it is the best performance you can get on a single untwisted or twisted pair, right? With one pair, we can get gig service symmetrical. And we have to remember that when you start using multiple pairs or doing various other things, this product essentially competes with the cost of labor. So everything we have done with our product has been about making it simple to deploy. It deploys like a regular ONT. It's, single pair. And so I know this isn't a lot about which technology, but we're more worried about keeping the unit very simple to deploy and easy to use, rather than worrying about specifically what technology. One thing that G.hn can do that we cannot do is G.hn can be run through coax splitters. So if you need to use coax in a building, most smaller buildings are point-to-point coax, and we're really focused on the smaller buildings. But as you get into larger buildings, there might be splitters. G.hn has some advantages when you go to really large buildings also, in terms of less likelihood of interference, which we can definitely talk about, but that's probably a whole nother discussion. And then Mocha is also an interesting option, but it is coax only, and so that kind of disqualifies it from a lot of our customers. So, it's a low cost chipset, but it's not really focused on the bulk of our customers.
Sure.
There is a question that is related to this from the audience, which is, can our solution at DZS be multi-point on coax, or does it have to be home run? And so I think that maybe the distinction we need to draw here as well.
Home run, yeah.
Home run, absolutely.
One more here. Will the existing landline phone still work over twisted pair with the NTD connected? So we haven't talked about voice much today, so maybe that's worth chatting for a second.
Yeah, I think voice is actually, a lot of people kind of think it's not that important, and in many cases it isn't, but I think in the long term it will be important, because as we get to full capacity in our ponds, we're going to be trying to retire the old copper. And so getting those last couple copper customers off of your copper cables so you can decommission them, and off of those Sonnet muxes and all that old equipment, especially, this is more of an incumbent thing, but when we get most of our data customers onto the pond, there's going to be a lot of incentive to get all the rest of the customers onto the pond. And as I mentioned, with this light touch fiber install that you can do, a customer that has just a phone is not going to have a lot of tolerance for a 3-hour fiber install. So to be able to go out there and just put a DPU on the outside of their house and then tell them to plug in an NTD plus V, which has a voice port. Essentially, it's a it's an ATA, right? A voice over IP ATA. But we do have a little skunkworks project where they can make those ports voice over IP as well, or I mean TDM as well. You can go to a GR303 interface. We're still looking for an application of somebody who wants to do that, and it's kind of a little side project, but it is something that if anybody's interested in supporting, we could. As far as them coexisting on the pair, I don't know if there's a filter solution. I mean, of course, we have power over those pairs as well. But generally, we tell people cut your customer off of their old service and use the ATA capability on the NTD plus V to provide voice service.
Yeah,
So
where we're headed.
there's another interesting question here that on a topic we have a slide about, we haven't really discussed yet, which is how does a PON operator manage the endpoint in the apartment? Is it all the way via OMCI, or do you have to jump on the device in the basement and learn how good the customer from there, how well the customer is connected? So maybe we just talk about this whole universal ONT concept.
Is that something you want to talk about, Mike? Or
Yeah, we should touch on it. I mean, we're running a bit long on our time here. We promised to keep this short, but as long as people are asking questions, we can keep going. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about the fact that it's essentially an ONT. You know, the DPU connects via OMCI, whether it's GPON or XGS-PON. And I think there was a question asking about point-to-point Ethernet. And again, the Milegate family, we have the ability to do the point-to-point Ethernet, but on this focus, we were more focused on the DPUs with the reverse powering and the ease of installation for this session. But so we do have that ability as well. You can dig into that a little bit deeper, Arian, about how the NTD gets its software and all that.
Yeah, so
upgrades and
so these can either be installed manually like a regular ONT, or some of our larger customers even have an app with a QR code scanner. You scan the QR code on the DPU, and it basically adds it to the PON. So that works really well. As soon as it connects, it starts to go to the OLT and look for a firmware upgrade. So the OLT would store the firmware. It would look for that upgrade. Then it would update, and if it needs to, it will also update the NTD to that question. So the DPU has visibility over to the NTD to know if it's within the correct software specification. So that'll upgrade. And then they may, if they've been in the warehouse for a while and there are a few loads behind, it may take a good 10 minutes for all the upgrades to happen. But if they're more recent, and maybe 5 minutes is more typical. And so to the user on the management platform of whatever OLT it is, you're going to just see, essentially, you're going to see a multi-port Ethernet ONT is what it's going to look like.
Or a single port Ethernet ONT if it's a single port
maybe
DPU. Okay. So what other questions do we have, Jeff?
Yeah, there's a couple more quick ones. One related to this, which was, okay, now we talked about PON, right? What about point-to-point uplinks? What's the option for fiber-based point-to-point?
Exactly. And I just mentioned that that's part of the Milegate family. That's not part of the former Netcom, the DPUs that we've been kind of focusing on with this discussion. But we do have the Milegate products that have the SFP cage, so you can have the point-to-point Ethernet uplinks, gig or 10 gig, depending on what your requirements are.
How would you, Mike, compare the one-port IP68 DPUs or the Netcom to the four-port Milegate? I mean, do you see it just as just functionally?
Well, I think they serve the similar purpose. Obviously, with the four-port, you got four ports, but I think if we're talking about pricing or something to that effect, how it models there. I really don't want to get into pricing on this conversation. We'd be happy to, if anybody has those questions, just reach out and we can handle it regionally and locally with our sales team. But it is a little different deployment model, if you will. With the one port DPU versus the 4-port mile gate. Mile gate you're going to be mounting on a wall. 4-port DPU could be submersible, like we've discussed, or the 1-port DPU. So if we want to talk more about pricing, we can do that separately.
Okay,
So,
2 more quick questions. I think
Okay.
most people will be interested in. One is the minimum operating temperature of the DPUs. We
Minimum
talked about there
operating
being
on
submersible,
IP68.
but how low can they go?
Yeah, so we have a lot of these deployed in Minneapolis, and they have been for several years. I've never heard of a problem with temperature. We have them deployed. We used to the Netcom versions. The earlier versions used to be black, and we have one mounted on a telephone pole facing south in Arizona, and it's been there for years. So that's not the ideal. We didn't talk about it, but we have a whole line of different mounting products for these things too. They can be strand mounted or covered, but basically we haven't seen any issues from environmental reasons. The one that I did see, we had one in a vault in Las Vegas, and you wouldn't think that would be wet, but they're constantly filled with irrigation water, and so we have lots of them that are underwater all the time. But one of them failed. And when they pulled it out to take a look at it, the whole case had been totally disintegrated. So I don't know if someone was cooking meth or something and dumped some chemicals in there, but the case was gone on that thing. But that's the only
Doesn't
one
bode
I've seen
well for
fail
the
through fiber.
fertilizer going into those.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, one last question is that we talked a lot about this being kind of indistinguishable from fiber, right? And the fact that honestly, I know I've seen a slide that you've had in other presentations, Arian, where you look at it and you can't tell the difference between this and and a gig pond deployment. What's the additional ping delay, right? So is there any additional latency that's put in if you're compared to ONT or direct fiber to the home approach?
Right, that's a very valid question. And we do add a small amount of latency, but it's very small. It's like 1 to 2 milliseconds worth of additional latency. So it is there. It's detectable, but probably not really when you look at, most of your customers and where the pings are going to. You wouldn't probably really notice it.
All right, I think we've hit most questions.
Well, I don't think we answered the question about the temperature range. So for IP68, the operating range is -20 to +70 C. So that's your operating range. If your question was, if the unit is sitting there without power, cold start, I don't know that answer, but -20 to +70 for the IP68 operating temperature is what we have. So other than that, Jeff, I think we've covered everything. We've gone a little longer than we had aimed, but I think with the questions, it's been good. Obviously, you can see here on the screen, if you have more details or more questions, you can email or ping us or something. For me, it's just michael.cady@dzsi.com. Arian, you saw his in early. Be happy to answer any other questions. You can reach out to your local sales team as well. And yeah, it's been fun. I think for an inaugural session, I've already got some ideas of how we'd like to do a little different, going forward, but I think this has been good, and I appreciate your time very much, Arian, and thank you for joining. And Jeff, thank you for hosting again.
Yeah, it's been a great format, I think, Mike, and a lot of interaction, which is what we were hoping for, and a lot of good questions. So let's keep your eyes open. We'll be following up this with another good deep dive here in the coming months. Okay.
Yeah, and as you can tell, I like talking about this stuff. So anybody out there, you're welcome to give me a call anytime.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mike.
Talk to you. Bye.